On this Western Conference Wednesday, we welcome special guest Paige Martin, team reporter and host for Oilers TV and Oilers Plus, to talk with us about a potentially wild Western Conference next season, former Predator Mattias Ekholm, and what Paige saw in an even younger Luke Evangelista.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Predators podcast, and thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are your free daily Nashville Predators podcast. We're a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to kick off this episode with a shout out to our Locked On Pred heads. Those are our everydayers who tune in to talk Nashville Predators hockey with us. We appreciate your support, and we love that we get to spend a little bit of your day with you. I'm Ann Kimmel. I'm a writer with Penalty Box Radio, and in a moment, I will be joined by my partner in crime, Emma Lingen. On today's show, Emma and I are joined by one of our very favorite voices in hockey, Paige Martin. Paige is the team reporter and host for Oilers TV and Oilers Plus in Edmonton. She was along for a wild 2023-2024 season with the Oilers. We're going to talk about those highs and lows. We're going to talk about the Western Conference coming up and former Predator Mattias Ekholm. Before we dive into all of that, want to let you know today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. We are joined now by our great friend, Paige Martin. Paige, of course, spends a lot of time on the road and at home in Edmonton with the Edmonton Oilers. We're going to talk about the Western Conference. We're going to talk about a wild Edmonton season. But you know, Paige, I absolutely have to start out asking you about what I refer to as my hockey gateway drug, and that is Mattias Ekholm, former Nashville Predator, love of my life, love of my hockey life. How is Mattias Ekholm doing? The stats seem to tell one story. I imagine it's probably pretty accurate.
Absolutely. You look at the stats and it doesn't give you the whole picture, but it gives you such an incredible starting point. I think, like, you ask in terms of how he's doing, I also think immediately of off the ice, but off the ice, him and his family, they love Edmonton, which has been so heartwarming to see. And just the way that, you know, it reminds them so much of Sweden. He always talks about, him and his wife often say that. So it's really, really nice that they've been able to kind of land and find a home in this place. But at the same time, what he's doing on the ice, he is referred to, you know, that trade that was made with Tyson Barrie, acquiring Mattias Ekholm is like one of the most historic things that has happened for the Oilers, to be able to make that happen at trade deadline because of the value that he's brought. Yes, to the blue line, and there's a whole focus there, but just in terms of like the team in general and his leadership. On the blue line, he's incredible. His pairing with Evan Bouchard is so much fun to watch. I mean, like, when they are on the ice, good things happen. Mattias Ekholm's plus minus is also a whole other stat to talk about in itself, but I think that what you see between Mattias and Evan is this veteran who's come alongside someone who was a couple years into the league with Evan. There's just like this potential that he keeps almost raising the ceiling of, it seems like. And Mattias has come alongside and allowed him room to grow in that even more. And I think when you're kind of watching it from that high level perspective, it's even cooler seeing, you know, the impact that Mattias has. And Evan, I know, loves playing with him as well. We see what Evan Bouchard does on the power play, but then, I mean, Mattias Ekholm, and just, you know, the size that he brings and the presence that he brings and the leadership, he's someone that, you know, if you're asked about his value, you just know, okay, well, he gets it, you know. And I think that Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, those guys have such an incredible amount of respect for Mattias. Yes, all the experience that he brings, but also just the way that he carries himself. And it's very easy to see that trickled throughout the team as well.
I look at his partnership with Bouchard and just how Bouchard has benefited from it. And I think back, the Predators in the 2017 Cup run had Mattias Ekholm with PK Subban and just how effective that was. So it's so interesting to see him with a player who's maybe a little bit younger and what opportunity that brings for everybody else on the ice when you've got Ekholm out there and the experience he had. And he's like, 34 years old, had a
Yeah.
career high. Like what are the expectations for him in the next year?
I think it's mostly like, please continue doing what you've been doing since you got here, kind of thing. I mean, everything that he has been doing has been wonderful. And I think that if you were to ask any, member of the Edmonton media, just a fan of the Edmonton Oilers, or even one of his coaches, I think that there would be a common answer in terms of like, when Mattias Ekholm is on the ice, there's really no worries about what could happen. Like, you kind of just know that he's going to take care of business and he's going to help Evan be able to shine in the way that Evan does offensively. And I love the way that Mattias kind of talks about the tandem that they have and kind of how they understand how the other plays in that way. So Mattias is very comfortable staying back home if it means that Evan gets to jump up into the play and play a little bit more of an offensive game. Whereas Mattias can also bring that offensive element, but it's not sacrificed. His defensive game is not sacrificed at all in any regard when it comes to that. So it's so cool that at any point he can also be a threat offensively, but maybe he's just a little bit quieter about it. There was a couple goals that he scored through the playoff run that were like, what on earth was that? Like, that is a goal scorer's goal. That is not like what his shot is remarkable. So I think, you talk about his entire game, there is something to compliment him on.
I think that kind of reminds me, just hearing the way you talk about how he plays alongside Bouchard, reminds me a little bit of, his longtime defensive partner here in Nashville was PK Subban. And it kind of seems like a similar kind of relationship there.
It's almost like he kind of thrives in figuring out the relationship. And then that's when he's like successful, is understanding, okay, how does my partner kind of work on the ice and what are they great at and how can I help them elevate? And then while he's helping them elevate, it also elevates himself. Like, his hockey IQ is just so high and he understands the game so well. And he's also so patient. I think seeing that on the ice too, like, you see it in the way that he'll keep the puck on his stick, right? Like, he doesn't toss it away. And that also comes with his, veteran experience. But at the same time, like, he's comfortable jumping up into a play or waiting for, his forwards to get to the right spot or when to clear it, whatever it is. Like, it always seems like he's making the right choice.
Yeah. You mentioned how much he and his family have talked about loving Edmonton. And that was one of the things when this trade went down, because Nashville and Edmonton are two very different environments.
Yes.
Just in hockey culture, they're two different environments. One of the things that some players really love about Nashville is you can be pretty anonymous in Nashville because, like, Dolly Parton has a house here. So, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You can walk around and be pretty anonymous. My guess is that is not the experience for a lot of the Oilers players in Edmonton. How has that adjustment been, do you think, for Mattias Ekholm? Because the just media coverage and the spotlight and everything just seems like it's just a little bit brighter in that particular market.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I've seen the energy that Nashville brings, and it's electric and it's so much fun. I think that what's different about Edmonton is, like, there's so many different things that you can care about in Nashville. Whereas, like, Edmonton, like, it's hockey. Like, you're caring about hockey and the whole entire city is just focused on this one team. And so Mattias is very fun to talk about when it comes to, like, this sort of topic in general, because I know, like, some of the media members were kind of joking about how they have mutual friends who have kids in, community soccer leagues here. And all the dads are kind of like jealous or even kind of like, okay, are you kidding me? So this guy's like a top NHL player and he's still showing up to his kid's soccer practice and he's volunteering his time. Like, what is this guy all about? Like, why is he why is he perfect? And so there's kind of like that joke amongst like Edmonton dads, because he is so present and involved in his kid's life. And that's something that's very important to him. And I remember it may have been the exit interviews this year, but sometimes towards the end of this past season, Mattias was talking about how, the transition into Edmonton and how he has a son who's kind of coming to the age where he's starting to understand, like, okay, my dad is my dad, but he's also like, other people know who he is. And so apparently there was one day, I believe he said it was at, his son's soccer practice or game. And there was a kid on a soccer team who was like, I really want to meet your dad. And he was like, I'm trying to just kind of navigate and understand, how do I explain to my son why people want to meet me? And so it's very like refreshing and almost just humanizing to be reminded, like, that's something that these guys have to navigate as well. Because I mean, especially like Mattias Ekholm, we also have, whenever he scores a goal, his like player kind of animation that comes up on the Jumbotron is a Viking. And
Come on.
Of course. And so like, yes, I mean, there's not a lot of guys who look like Mattias Ekholm in Edmonton. And so, he does get recognized a lot, as do like all of the other players, because again, everyone just has the awareness. But I think that's been something where he's probably noticed a huge transition and navigating everything that comes with that.
Also in that trade, I want to point out that you got Ida.
Exactly. Which is huge for gals like us, the sports broadcasting girls, because, right? I know. And she is just, again, like, just that human element. She's got to be one of the best humans there. And so it's so nice to be able to see her at the rink. And she always goes out of her way to say hello to our team, ask us how we're doing, how the season's going. And that's just who the Ekholms are.
Anne's getting sad now.
I know. I was like, I'm hoping that this is making you feel better, but I also recognize
I love that he's happy. And I will say, it was really great to have that emotional connection all the way through the Stanley Cup Finals. Emma and I, on a recent episode, we talked about like one of those hockey moments that lives rent free in your head. And mine is where the buzzer went off in Game 7 and Mattias Ekholm was in like the left side of the screen and just slammed his stick on the ice. And I thought, on my deathbed, unfortunately, I fear that will play.
It just shattered Anne's Swedish heart into a million pieces.
And you in olive oil country, you would do great here.
I would. I really would. Coming up, we're going to talk with Paige about the Oilers' up and down season last year and what to expect from a wild Western Conference next season. Fall is around the corner, and if you are looking for a last-minute summer event or you want to make some plans for fall fun, you have got to check out Game Time. Game Time is the fastest and easiest way to get tickets for your favorite sports, comedy, music, and theater events. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live event even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Football is kicking off, and if you want to check out local collegiate games or a Titans game, you can get those great seats at Game Time. Game Time gives you a view from your seat so you know up front what you're getting, and when you toggle the all-in pricing feature, you're going to see your total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. So let's talk about last season. That was one of the most up and down seasons because, of course, Edmonton started off and just couldn't get it going. And it was, I think, shocking to everybody, made a coaching change. And at that point, we're so low in the standings, everybody sort of said, oh, it would just be a miracle if they could get into the postseason. And then you end up in the Stanley Cup Finals in Game 7. Walk us through just your experience going through a season like that.
it's funny, almost like reflecting on the season as a whole and how it started and then how it ended. But then you also look at just like the Stanley Cup final series and the way that those two are so similar. And I think that had the Oilers not experienced what they did at the beginning of the year, they wouldn't have been able to succeed and write one of the greatest comebacks in sports history. Maybe I'm biased on that, but that was an absolute spectacle to watch, the way that, they forced a Game 7. And so I think that, the best way to describe it is like a crazy roller coaster, because you wake up one morning and all of a sudden there's coaching change. And then you're wondering, okay, how much is changing? You're kind of trying to vibe out how the players feel about it as well. And there was definitely a lot of, that's an emotional toll that takes. But that being said, the organization and like the team in general just did such a good job in making sure that everyone was on the same page to just move forward. And I love when Chris Knobloch came in, he kind of was like, look, like, I'm not going to change a whole bunch of stuff because that's not going to be impactful. I've recognized 3 main areas that need to be changed, and that's what we're going to work on, and everything else will fall into place. And like, as someone who is, a communications major, I was like, oh my gosh, I love this. Key messages. You can only digest so much in this brain. So let these guys who are so good at their job, it's just the results aren't showing right now. Let them just go out and focus on 3 things and see what happens. And then like December hits and things are kind of starting to turn around. We had a 7-game win streak. We were like, okay, like this is kind of happening. And then after Christmas, all of a sudden, that was the start of, well, right before Christmas in New York as well. But that was kind of the start of the 16-game win streak, which was just insane. And we played so many games at home as well in January. And that was so much fun because it was like with every single win, there was just more and more excitement. And when something like that is happening in Edmonton, where everyone is so invested in this team, it felt like playoffs had started in January, because it was also just like beautiful to watch the way that the city had this like hope reborn in a way of what this season could be. So, I mean, from that, and then we kind of understood at the end of January, like, okay, this team is legit. They're going to be able to go for it. And then the playoffs were what the playoffs were. So it was an incredibly long season filled with so many milestone events.
Right.
And then at the end, you like look back and you're like, oh my God, like that happened just this season.
It had to feel like multiple seasons and stories all packed into one, because it just so much happened.
Yeah. I feel like from, as a media member, like from my point of view, it was like, I was so grateful because there was so many storylines at any given time. Also, Connor McDavid doing what he was doing with his assists and the records that was setting last year. And, you're continuously watching him creep up to that century mark. So that was also something. And it was just so much, it shifted away from what is going on. This doesn't make any sense that we're losing, to this makes a lot of sense. What is going on? Kind of. So it was awesome. And I feel as though everyone's kind of, now that we're at the, looking in the next couple of weeks for next season to start, now that we're kind of at that mark, it's like, okay, I think we've caught our breath. I think we're caught up on sleep. I think everyone is okay here. And I think that we also all have such a firm belief in what is possible next season, and how much did that teach these guys in terms of when things are low, they really truly did not get low. Like, because when you go in the dressing room, you can feel that vibe, like you can feel the emotions of like, okay, like how is everyone actually feeling? Like they were always fine, like the headlines may not have always been fine, but they were good. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Talking about, everybody is getting ready to sort of turn the page in the next couple weeks with training camps starting. And you talk about expectations for next season. Emma and I have, sort of done some speculating. And when you look at the Western Conference, first of all, what are your expectations for the Oilers? And then what are some other teams that you're watching in the Western Conference?
I think my expectation for the Oilers is, to end up in a very similar spot and in a very similar position heading into playoffs that they were. And I think for the season, the Oilers are going to be kind of the ones that are the team to take down. Like if you can beat the Oilers, you got a shot, which is absolutely valid. Like it's going to be a great measure as long as the Oilers are playing to their potential, you know, each and every single game, especially with the acquisitions that we made. I'm specifically talking about Jeff Skinner and Victor Arvidsson as well. I'm very excited to see the way that those two integrate into the mix. And obviously we know the relationship that Victor and Mattias have. And I know that Mattias is definitely very excited to have him. But at the same time, it's just going to be cool to see because it's a different complexion of a team. So to see how they kind of adjust and then adapt. But I think when it comes to the Western Conference, I'm excited for the first time that we get to see the Canucks because the manner that we beat them in playoffs was crazy as well. Like that goes to Game 7. And that was, you know, a very intense series. And especially like being in Canada, just like provinces side by side, just going back and forth. Like there was a different type of energy in it. And especially when Canadian teams play each other, there's a different energy. And then they play each other in the second round of the playoffs. And the Oilers hadn't beat the Canucks in the regular season. So there's like so many different things. I'm very excited to see that. But I think that it's going to be another, like the Western Conference, when I think about, you know, the top 4 teams, I think it's going to be a tight race. And I'm excited to see it.
We here in Nashville, thank you for your service in defeating Vancouver in the playoffs.
Thank you.
We had a rough go of it here.
Yeah, that was also, you guys, like, that was exciting. I know Anne and I were selfishly very excited for the possibility of facing one another. And then it didn't happen. But I mean, that Vancouver series, I think a lot of people were on the edge of their seats for. And like the Canucks, the way that they have compete, like, they are
tough.
Yeah, like they're such a fun team to watch. And the way that they battled with their goalie situation as well. Like, I mean, for us to be able to kind of squeak it out there, it's all we needed. But
yeah. And they got one of the Nashville Predators, one of their like grit guys, Kiefer Sherwood. They signed him in the offseason. So Predators fans are keeping their eye on the Canucks because that first round series, I think, really kind of kicked off what I think is going to carry over into this next season as kind of a rivalry with the Predators and Canucks, because it was brutal, Paige. I mean, it was such a rough, tough series. So I agree. Vancouver's they're going to be a very interesting team next season in the Western Conference.
And I think like credit to the Preds for being able to combat that in the way that they did, because like I know the Oilers kind of had a little bit of okay, we got to get used to this style of play. Like who's going to step up in these physical moments? And I think like to be met with that in the first round of the playoffs is crazy. And for the Canucks to be able to like use that to their advantage, and then for the Preds to step up and say, okay, like there's no choice here but to battle.
I think that's actually in Vancouver when they signed Kiefer Sherwood. I think that's what their GM said, was like, yeah, he was pissing our guys off too much out there. We had to go sign him. So it was like, when you have those kind of guys, like, you know, they may not be the guys that are going to be the most skilled or make the flashy plays, especially throughout the regular season. But man, you have moments like that, you really see, you know, who's going to step up.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It adds so much depth, right? And makes suddenly your lineup so dynamic when you do have someone like that who, okay, maybe they're not going to score a goal every single game, but are they going to go and make things messy out there? And like, that's also an investment as well. Like every hit is an investment. So like that's invaluable, especially come playoffs.
In a moment, Paige is going to share with us her inside perspective on a young Luke Evangelista and how his trajectory in the OHL may end up predicting his future in the NHL. We want to thank you for making Locked On Predators your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On NHL podcast. Locked On NHL provides you with a national perspective on all things NHL each and every day, with national experts and local insight on every team in the league. Available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. One of the people who really stepped up for Nashville in that first round playoff is somebody that you know very well, and that is Luke Evangelista. So explain to everybody how you know our dear Luke Evangelista.
So when I was in the beginning of my broadcasting career, I was broadcasting with the London Knights. And of course, Luke Evangelista played in the Ontario Hockey League for the London Knights. And was always just the utmost pleasure to interview. And then, of course, he had a year of also being captain. And so we were interviewing him frequently. And his junior career was so much fun to watch because it didn't start in the way that he thought it would have. And that's okay. He got his footing after his rookie season when he didn't score. And then his second year, the first time that he scores his first OHL goal, he ends up scoring a hat trick that game. And everyone all of a sudden had a glimpse of like, oh, okay, wait, like, yes, it's only one game, but like maybe this kid's legit. And it turns out that the kid is very legit. And I feel like, honestly, since that moment, he was on an upward trajectory, and he's done such a good job in like raising the bar for himself and for everyone's expectations of him as well. Because, when he was drafted to the NHL, yes, there was work to do. Yes, he wanted to get a little bit bigger, a little bit quicker. And like, he's done those things. And he's made sure that he is, a crucial member of his team. And I think it's just like so much fun to watch someone be able to take those steps, understand the process, take the steps required. And then you're seeing like the fruit of your labor. And he's incredibly talented. I don't want to take like any of his, his gifts away either, but his work ethic has really been awesome to watch.
Yeah, I feel like it's been a pleasure for us to see not only what you're talking about, but also like as a result of that, his confidence has grown over the last 2 seasons. And it's been very evident in the way that he plays and the way that he carries himself. And I think that he's almost, and Ann and I have kind of talked about this before, but it's almost like he has given Predators fans kind of a false expectation of what we should expect from rookies when they come into the NHL, in how quickly he was able to adapt and how, and obviously it's never going to be linear. He struggled a little bit too, even at the beginning of this most recent season, kind of struggled a little bit. Andrew Burnett benched him for a game. He came back guns blazing and, never benched him again. And so I think for a lot of players, it takes more than just benching for one game or whatever. And I think that with Luke, he, and I've talked to now former Predators assistant coach Dan Highnote about, kind of how do you get the most out of Luke? Like, how do you really, because every player is different, right? And one thing that he said that was really interesting to me, and it kind of tracks with everything we know about him, is that, Luke, the best way to motivate him is to like tell him that he can't do something or to challenge him. And I'm like, hey, I relate. But it's like, if you tell him like, hey, you look scared out there, he'll be like, well, I'm not scared. And then, like he'll come back and show us that he's not scared. And so I think that, it's been cool to see him kind of just, for being as young as he is, it's like he just gets it. He gets it. And even though he's, maybe it's not like he's leading the team in scoring or anything, but he's still like, you can just see the confidence and the maturity that he plays with is, I think, beyond his years.
Absolutely. And I think like exactly what you're explaining in terms of like, tell him that he can't and then watch what happens. I have to think that comes with like growing up with sisters, because
Come on.
right? Like I really do think that maybe they need some credit there. But it's so exciting because it's like, okay, well, if you think about, has he had his breakout year yet? Is that still to come? What does his breakout year look like? Oh my goodness, what's possible for this guy? Like you think about what he's done in the last 2 years. Well, what's he going to do this season and next season? And where is he going to be in 2 years from now? And how's he going to be performing? And who's he going to be playing alongside? Like, so that's also really exciting for him. And I think that that's also something, Emma, kind of when you talk about like his mindset that he has and how he just gets it, like he gets how to adapt and how to understand what he needs to do in order to keep playing at that level, but then also level up as well. And that's something that's been really evident. I really saw that during his time in London, and I think that's what set him apart. And I know that, the Predators definitely saw that when they took him in the second round. And it's so exciting to see like what's possible for a player like him.
He is our player when, we talk with other hosts and they'll say like, who is the breakout player that you expect to see more from next season? Luke Evangelista really is for us, I think, the player that we're watching for that. And I love that you point out that like his OHL career didn't start off as he anticipated it would. And I think sometimes, and we've had conversations about this with other players recently, sometimes you have to kind of take that hard route to really learn what it's going to take. And so it's been really great to see what he has learned as a young player and how he kind of is building on that on the NHL, stage. We have high expectations for him. Also, delight to cover.
There's that. Exactly.
I mean, delightful kid.
Yeah.
Also, it's funny how you said that what was his first OHL goal, he ended up getting a hat trick. His first NHL goal, I remember because I was traveling with the team at the time and it was in Vancouver and he scored twice in that game. Mm-hmm. And it was funny because you could tell like the whole end of the third period, guys were trying to get him the puck. Like it was so evident, but it was, that's really cool.
I guess it's just the way he rolls. Like once he gets a taste of it, he just wants more right away, which is fantastic. It's great to have that on your team.
So before we go, I want to ask you just a personal question. Looking at your career, if you were to talk to somebody who is looking to get a job in sports broadcasting, sports media, especially, and just with the makeup of this podcast, let's talk about a young woman who wanted to get into sports and sports journalism, sports broadcasting. What is the best piece of advice you would pass on?
Oh, there's so much. I want to make sure that it's also like digestible. Sometimes I would like hear advice and I'd be like, okay, but like, what's the how? Like, how do I actually go about applying that? Mm-hmm. And I think something that's very valuable is just simply saying yes and not being closed-minded. Because I think that often, especially if you want to be, let's say if you do want to be on camera, what it is, you kind of see like a specific path in order to get there, but there is like absolutely no specific path in order to get there. There's no right or wrong path to get there. So I think like being able to soak up as many opportunities as possible and networking, I think that's also, that kind of like ties into it as well, is like just be a good human. Like just be the kind of human that like you want to surround yourself with, right? Because the network, especially in hockey, like is so vast, but also like so tight knit and close, and everyone seems to know each other, and you don't know who you're talking to may know someone who could like hook you up with your next internship or your entry level job, whatever it may be. And so I think like just treating people the best possible way gets you so far. And having meaningful, relationships and conversations with people. I think that has been one of the most rewarding things for me, is just like the people that I've been able to meet in the industry. And like when you find those good people, it's like you find those good people and then you'll also have them in your life for like a very long time. So yeah, don't say no to opportunities. Be open, and also be open to like what your skill set may be. It might be different than what you thought. Maybe you're actually, more gifted in one area that you didn't know before. So just staying open, saying yes, and be a good human. I think that would be hopefully those are tangible things, because yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Before we wrap up though, Paige, we do want to let everyone know, where can they follow you on social media and keep up with you?
Well, thank you. I am on Twitter and Instagram. My handle is the same. It's my name at Paige Martin, but instead of the E at the end of Paige, it's a Y. So at Paige Martin. And you can call me Paigey. A lot of people do. So some people actually, when they see me in person, like at Rogers Place, they will call me Paigey. And I'm like, you know what? I guess we're friends now.
We're going to go with it.
Sure, we're going to go with it.
Speaking of Rogers Place, just want to throw out that we are hoping that we're going to get to see you at Bridgestone Arena, because of course Oilers and the Predators are going to be facing off in October. So we're going to keep our eyes peeled for Paige Martin at Bridgestone Arena, y'all.
I was going to say, I think that the schedule makers did us a favor. Like 2 quick hits right in October is just, you're getting the Oilers right away, but most importantly, we're getting to collab. So
we love it. We love it.